That night, the wind off the water hissed through the cracks in the door like someone trying not to cry out loud. At my son's house, the candle on the table burned down low and the smell of butter and garlic mixed with the salt air leaking in from the porch. I had just set the last plate of cookies on the counter when he looked at me, cold as the ocean in winter, and said, "Mom, you should go. Christmas this year. I've got it." Then he dragged my late husband's chair away from the spot I was about to take, like he was dragging the last piece of my memory out of my hands. I stepped outside with my fingers shaking from the cold, my chest hollow like the harbor at low tide. The next morning, the bank called. My name had been removed from our joint account, with a form that said I had signed it. I hadn't. And in that moment, I understood something that made my knees weak. They hadn't just pushed me out of a chair. They were trying to push me out of my own life. My name is Grace Bennett, and in 2025, I was 57 years old. I live in a small coastal town, one of those places where winter comes early and the fog can roll in so thick it feels like the world has been erased down to a few streetlights and the sound of gulls. Out here, the horn from the harbor can sound like a warning or a prayer. Depends on what kind of day you're having. After my husband, Evan, died from a stroke 2 years ago, I moved here because it was the last place I ever saw him truly at peace. Evan used to say, on nights when we stood by the seawall and watched the lighthouse blink in the distance, "People live slower here. If you ever need to breathe again, Grace, breathe here." I thought I would. But sometimes slow doesn't mean gentle. Sometimes it just means the hurt has time to settle in. Christmas 2025 was coming fast. In our town, they hang lights early right after Thanksgiving. Even the bait shop doors get wreaths. The main street puts up a big tree and posts a sign that reads, "Christmas 2025 tree lighting, deck 23. I've never been the loud type. I'm the quiet kind of Christmas. Cookie dough on my hands, wrapping paper scraps in the trash, the same old ornaments that don't match but feel like home. I'm also the kind of woman who holds on to what matters. Like Evan's chair. It wasn't fancy. Solid oak, worn at one corner where he always sat. The arms were smooth from years of his hands. Evan called it the house chair. I called it the last place he still felt close. My son, Noah, was 33. He lived about 15 minutes away with his wife, Sierra, in a house that looked out over the bay. They had a backyard that faced the boats at their moorings like a postcard. Noah ran a small seafood place, lobster rolls, clam chowder, something tourists loved in summer. He even named it like it was built on family, Bennett's Wharf. Last year, when Noah opened, money was tight. He asked me for help. He said if we opened a joint account together, it would be easier to manage business expenses. He said my credit was strong and it would help them avoid a high interest rate if they needed a line of credit for supplies. I hesitated. But then I looked at my son, at the face I used to press kisses into when he was sick with a fever at 3 years old. And I softened the way mothers do, even when we shouldn't. I put part of Evan's life insurance money into that joint account. I told myself I was helping my child stand on his own feet. I told myself that was what family meant. I didn't understand yet that some people treat family like a key until they decide to change the locks. Sierra called me the week before Christmas. Her voice was sweet, bright, like she'd practiced it. "Mom, come over Sunday. I want to do a trial run for Christmas dinner. You can help me with seasoning." I said yes. I brought cinnamon, unsalted butter, and a little cookie cutter shaped like a star, one Evan had bought when we were newly married. That night, December 17th, 2025, the wind cut straight through my coat. I arrived right as the sky went dark. Christmas music was playing in the kitchen, and Sierra was laughing while stirring a pot of chowder. On the counters were trays of food, herb turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. "It smells wonderful," I said. Noah glanced at me and gave the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Yeah, Sierra did it." I tried not to let it sting. The living room was crowded, more people than I expected. Sierra's younger brother Ty sat with his feet up like he owned the place. There was also an older man in a leather jacket talking loudly about boats and engines and how the real money came from having the right equipment before the spring season hit. I said hello. They answered like it was a chore. Then I saw Evan's chair. It was sitting in the corner of their dining room, I stopped like I'd run into a ghost. I asked Noah softly, "Why is your father's chair here?" He shrugged. Needed more seating. It took everything in me not to say, "That chair isn't seating. That chair is a life." When Sierra called everyone to the table to taste test, I instinctively moved toward Evan's chair. I hadn't even touched it when Noah's hand landed on the back of it, and he pulled it away from me. "No, Mom, sit over there." He pointed to a smaller chair closer to the kitchen, like an extra chair, like the kind you give someone who isn't really part of the room. I froze. Sierra let out a tiny laugh like it was no big deal. "Mom, Ty always sits there. You sit here, okay? You'll be closer to the kitchen, more convenient if I need help." My ears went hot. "That's your father's chair," I said. Noah looked tired, annoyed. "Mom, here we go again. It's just a chair." "It's not just—" My voice shook. "Noah, your dad—" "Christmas is at my house," he cut me off. "We want you here, but don't make things tense." I looked around. Ty smirked. The guy in the leather jacket chuckled into his drink. Sierra adjusted napkins like she couldn't hear me. In that moment, I felt like furniture myself. Something old they kept around until it didn't match the new decor. I sat in the kitchen chair. My back stayed straight, but my heart felt bruised. During dinner, they talked about buying a boat, about expanding the business, about important guests they were hosting for Christmas. When I quietly mentioned that winter revenue could dip and they should be careful with spending, Noah put his fork down and sighed. "Mom, you always assume the worst. You always act like disaster is around the corner." I tried, gently. "I just don't want you to—" Sierra set her glass down with that same sweet tone, only sharper underneath it. "Mom, honestly, I think you should relax. You focus on money stuff so much it makes everything heavy." Noah nodded like he'd been waiting for her to say it. And then the line landed, soft as snow, heavy as a stone. "Mom, you should go. Christmas this year. I've got it." I stared at my son. I tried to find the little boy who used to cling to my leg when the ocean roared too loud. But the man in front of me was a stranger sitting in a warm house, telling his mother she didn't belong at his table. I stood up. No one stopped me. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the cold. The wind slapped my cheeks raw. I walked down the porch steps and heard the door close behind me. I drove home with my hands stiff on the steering wheel. The streets were lined with blinking lights. I remembered Evan saying once, "Lights are beautiful because they choose to shine in the dark." That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the plate of cookies I'd brought. Cookies no one bothered to eat. I took one bite. The butter melted. And somehow everything still tasted like nothing. I thought that was the bottom. I didn't know yet there was a trap door underneath it. The next morning, December 18th, I woke up early. In a coastal town, winter mornings come late and gray, like the sky never fully commits to daylight. I poured coffee and stared out my window at the still water. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, this is Harbor Federal Credit Union," a woman said. "We're calling to confirm a recent change on an account." I blinked. "What change?" "Ma'am, you were removed as a joint owner on the account ending in—" She read the numbers. "We're verifying that you submitted the request yesterday." My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. "Yesterday? I didn't go to the bank. I didn't sign anything." There was a pause, and her voice shifted into something careful. "Our system shows a signed form on file. We need you to come in today so we can verify identity and documentation." I hung up with my hands shaking. I opened the banking app. Access denied. I tried again. Same thing. I stood in my kitchen feeling like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that my name, my authority, my existence had been erased with the swipe of a pen. I threw on my coat and drove straight to the bank. The branch sat near the harbor. The front door had a big sticker of Santa smiling. I walked past it and felt something sour rise in my throat. A young teller asked how she could help. I didn't bother with small talk. I was removed from my joint account I didn't sign. They brought me to a little desk. The manager, Mr. Collins, came over with the kind of polite smile that meant he wanted this handled quietly. "Mrs. Bennett, first of all, I'm sorry for the distress. This is the form, remove joint owner, submitted with your signature. He slid a photocopy across the desk. I stared at the signature. It looked like my name, but it wasn't my hand. My G loops a certain way. I cross my T higher. This one was wrong, careful in the way fake things are careful. I did not sign this, I said. Mr. Collins exhaled, lowering his voice. Is it possible you signed it and don't recall? Sometimes customers... I looked up at him. Are you suggesting I'm confused? No, he said quickly. I'm just saying sometimes people forget. We can open a fraud investigation if you're certain. There it was, the door he was holding open. If I backed down, it would all stay nice. If I insisted, I would become difficult. I placed my palm flat on the desk. Open the investigation, right now. They brought out a stack, a fraud affidavit. I signed my real name, slow, steady, like I was anchoring myself to the truth. Mr. Collins said, "This can take time, a few days." How many days? We'll try to resolve it before Christmas. I gave a small laugh that held no warmth. I could hear Evan's voice in my head. Don't let them try. Make them do. Who submitted the form? I asked. Who requested to remove me? He shook his head. Privacy policies. It's my account, I said. My name is being used to erase me. This isn't privacy. This is theft. He hesitated, then said quietly, the form was submitted in person. A bank employee verified the signature. Which employee? He didn't answer right away. The young teller at the desk looked down and then flicked her eyes sideways for half a second. An instinctive glance that told me there was something she didn't want to say out loud. I left with paperwork in my hands and a storm in my chest. At home, I called Noah. No answer. I texted, Noah, I need to talk to you about the bank account. It's serious. Nothing. Around noon, Sierra texted instead of Noah. Mom, we're busy. The bank thing is probably a misunderstanding. Please don't make it a big deal. Christmas is almost here. I read the words, don't make it a big deal, over and over. I'd heard that phrase my whole life, from people who wanted peace at any price, especially if I was the one paying it. But this time, it didn't feel like advice. It felt like a threat. So I did something I never imagined doing. I called a lawyer. Her name was Harper. Silver hair, calm voice, the kind of woman who sounded like she'd seen every version of betrayal and still didn't flinch. After I explained, she said, Grace, you need to do 3 things. 1, demand the bank preserve evidence, camera footage, logs. 2, file a police report. 3, freeze your credit and secure any other accounts. If they did this once, they can do it again. My throat tightened. And if it's my own son? There was a pause. If it's your son, she said gently, then you need documentation even more. So one day, when you look back, you don't question your own sanity. And so they understand your name is not something they get to borrow. I drove to the police station. It was small. This town doesn't have big anything in winter. An officer named Miller took my statement. Do you suspect anyone had motive? He asked. I didn't want to say it. I hated how it sounded, but I also couldn't lie. The account is joint with my son and daughter-in-law. Officer Miller's eyes changed, not shocked, just aware, like he'd heard this story before. That night I sat in Evan's chair at home. I ran my fingers along the smooth armrest. Evan, I whispered, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I can't let them erase me. My phone pinged again. A postal alert. Mail forwarding requested. I stared at it, confused, then remembered the bank account had an address attached to it. I walked out to the mailbox. A bank envelope sat inside, but it was addressed to Noah's house. Stamped on the front, new debit card enclosed. My access was gone. But the new card had been sent to them? That's when doubt turned into certainty. Not suspicion. Truth? I stood on my porch, breathing in cold salt air, watching my neighbors' Christmas lights blink happily. They were preparing for Christmas. And I was preparing for war. But not the kind with yelling and chaos. The kind with paperwork, truth, and the quiet decision to go all the way. On December 19th, I went back to the bank and asked to speak to Mr. Collins again. I want the full paperwork. I want to know who verified the signature. I want the security footage from the lobby that day. He said, "We can't release footage to a private individual, only to law enforcement, or with a subpoena." I nodded. "I've filed a report. Law enforcement will request it." My attorney has also sent a preservation letter. For the first time, he looked at me like I wasn't just an upset older woman. He looked uneasy, because he understood this wasn't going to get smoothed over. Attorney Harper told me, "Good. Now you need one more thing, proof they knew it was wrong. A message, a recording, anything." I didn't want to turn my home into a trap, but I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life being told I was overreacting. So I installed a simple doorbell camera, cheap, clear enough for audio. And then I waited. On December 20th, Noah showed up. It was late afternoon. Light snow drifted down. He stood on my porch and didn't step inside right away. I opened the door. My son's eyes were red, wind or guilt, I couldn't tell. "Mom," he said quietly, "Sierra says you're making a big thing out of this." I didn't smile. "Answer me, Noah. Did you remove me from the account?" He looked away. "Mom, you don't understand. We needed it to be easier. Sierra said the bank wanted one clear name on it so we could finance a boat for the business. We need a better boat before spring." "A boat," I repeated. The words sank like a rock. Noah rushed on, like if he spoke fast enough it would become reasonable. "I wasn't trying to take your money. I was going to pay it back. We just needed it temporarily." "Temporarily by forging my signature?" I asked. Noah fell silent, and that silence told me everything. I stood there, not crying, just feeling something split open in my chest. "You know why I put that money in there?" I asked softly. "Because your father died. Because I was afraid of getting sick and becoming your burden. I wanted to make sure I wouldn't have to beg you for help." Noah swallowed hard. "Mom, I'm sorry, but Sierra's stressed. Her dad is coming for Christmas. She wants to prove I can provide. She said, if we don't get that boat, the business is done." I looked at him. "So you kicked me out of dinner, and the next day my name disappears. And you call that providing?" Noah's shoulders shook. "Mom, please don't call the cops. If you do, I'll lose everything." That's when something bitter rose in me. He was terrified of losing everything. But he hadn't been terrified of losing me. I said, "Go home, Noah." "Mom, go." He turned to leave, and as he did, he muttered, almost without thinking, "Sierra says she knows someone at the bank." It was easy. I didn't move until his car pulled away. Then I went inside and replayed the doorbell audio. I heard every word. I sent the file to Harper. She replied with one line. That's enough to bring it into the light. December 21st and 22 passed like a small storm. Phone calls, documents, police follow-ups. The kind of busy that doesn't feel productive. It just feels like you're holding your breath and hoping you don't break. Then the bank called. Mr. Collins sounded different now, more careful, more serious. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "we've identified irregularities. A bank employee handled your paperwork in a way that violates procedure. She's been suspended pending investigation." "What's her name?" I asked. A pause. "Mandy." My mind flashed to the young teller's uneasy glance, and Sierra's sweet voice saying, "Don't make it a big deal." I asked, "Is Mandy connected to my family?" "We can't conclude that at this time," Collins said. I let out a quiet, humorless breath. "Mr. Collins, I don't need a conclusion to know who's holding the knife. I just need you not to hide it." Harper sent another formal letter. Officer Miller sent a request for footage. On December 23rd, the town held the tree lighting in the square. Families gathered with hot cocoa. Kids wore Santa hats. Cameras flashed. I went too. Not because I felt festive, because I knew Noah and Sierra would be there, and if they planned to announce anything, they'd do it in public where it looked like joy. I stood at the edge of the crowd with my scarf tight around my neck. Christmas music played. Lights glowed. Inside me, something ached. I used to believe Christmas softened people. that it made them remember what mattered. But some people only use Christmas as a curtain. Noah arrived with Sierra on his arm. Sierra looked radiant. White coat, curled hair, bright smile. Beside them was a man I assumed was her father. He had the kind of face that judged everything in the world as either worthy or worthless. I didn't approach. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Officer Miller. We received bank footage. Come to the station tomorrow morning. There's progress. My heart pounded. Christmas Eve morning, December 24th. I sat at the station as Officer Miller played a clip from the bank's lobby camera. There was Sierra, clear as day. She stood at the counter talking to a young woman, Mandy. They leaned in close like friends. Mandy handed Sierra a form. Sierra signed it. Then, quickly, Mandy slid a second form on top, pointed to the signature line, and placed the pen in Sierra's hand. Sierra signed again. Mandy stamped it, nodded, and filed it like it was perfectly normal. I felt like I'd been turned to stone. Officer Miller said, "We're looking at forgery, financial fraud, and potential internal collusion." I asked, "Was Noah there?" He shook his head. "Not in this footage." I didn't know if that made it hurt less or more. Noah hadn't done the physical act, but he had known. He had benefited. He had stayed quiet. Harper asked me that afternoon, "Grace, you have two options. 1, settle quietly, get your funds restored, and walk away. 2, pursue this fully, and let consequences fall where they fall. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking you what kind of life you want after this." I looked out the window at the soft snow coming down. The town was preparing for Christmas. Somewhere, people were wrapping presents. I thought about Evan, his chair. That phrase again. Don't make it a big deal. I said, I want to live the rest of my life without needing permission to exist. Harper nodded once. Then we go all the way. That evening, Noah called me, frantic. "Mom, what are you doing? Sierra says the bank called. Cops asked questions." I kept my voice calm. "I'm doing what's right. Are you afraid?" Noah didn't answer. I said, "Do you remember what your dad taught you? If you do wrong, you own it. He didn't teach you to shove your mother aside and use her name like a tool." Noah's voice broke. "Mom, I don't want Sierra to go to jail." "And what did you think would happen when you erased my name?" I asked softly. "Did you think I'd stay quiet because Christmas was coming?" Noah breathed hard. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll tell the truth. I'll sign whatever. I'll confirm it." I didn't feel relief. I felt exhaustion. I didn't want apologies. I wanted actions that couldn't be undone with a smile. That night, Noah and Sierra still held their Christmas Eve dinner. They still hosted their important guest and her father, a few friends. I hadn't planned to go, but Harper said, "If you want to end this without screaming but with certainty, you need to face it. Not to fight, just to draw a line." So I put on a black coat, wrapped my scarf, and held a thick folder. My affidavit, the attorney letters, the police report number, and printed stills from the bank footage. I arrived at Noah's house around 7. Christmas lights covered the porch. Laughter leaked from inside like a wall I wasn't supposed to cross. I rang the bell. Sierra opened the door. Her smile flickered. "Mom, why are you here?" I said quietly. "I'm here for Christmas. Like a mother." She swallowed and stepped aside. The table was set beautifully. Evan's chair sat off to the side again, like decor. Noah stood up, eyes red. Sierra's father looked at me like I was a problem. Sierra lifted her voice, trying to control the room. "Mom, the house is full. Please don't." I raised a hand gently. "I won't be loud. I just need to say one thing in front of everyone. Then I'll go." Noah whispered, "Mom." I opened my folder. "My name, Grace Bennett, was removed from our joint account," I said. "The bank says I signed the form. I did not." Sierra let out a tight laugh. "Mom, you're imagining. Maybe you—" I looked straight at her. "Don't." I placed the printed stills on the table. "This is Sierra. This is Mandy, the bank employee. This is the moment Sierra signed the removal form." The room went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air thickened. Sierra's father stood abruptly. "What?" Sierra's face drained. She turned to Noah like he was supposed to save her. Noah, say something. Noah stared at the papers, lips trembling. I continued, slow and clear. I filed a fraud report. The police have bank footage. My attorney has sent formal letters. The bank is investigating internally. Sierra's voice snapped. You're trying to ruin my Christmas. I looked at her. You ruined it when you forged my signature. Her father stepped closer, furious. Sierra, you told me this was a misunderstanding. Sierra stammered, Dad, Noah needed help. It was temporary. I turned to Noah. Noah, did you know? Noah squeezed his eyes shut like he'd been hit by a wave. When he opened them, tears spilled. I knew, he said hoarse. I'm sorry. The word sorry dropped into the room like a spoon into a bowl. Small, but it echoed. Sierra shrieked, Noah! Noah's voice broke all the way open. Enough, Sierra. You said Mom wouldn't do anything. You said we needed the boat. You said Mandy would handle it. You turned my mother into an obstacle. Hearing him say it didn't make me happy. It just made me tired in a different way. Then the doorbell rang again. Officer Miller stood on the porch with another man wearing a jacket with the bank's logo, legal or compliance. Officer Miller spoke politely, firmly. We have a request for an immediate statement regarding suspected financial fraud. Ms. Sierra Bennett, you need to come with us for questioning. Sierra's eyes went wide. No, it's Christmas Eve. Officer Miller didn't blink. Christmas doesn't erase forgery. Sierra whipped toward me, hatred sharp as glass. You wanted this. You wanted me dragged out in front of everyone. I met her gaze. My voice was small, but it didn't shake. I wanted my name back. I wanted my son saved from someone who believes temporary is an excuse to commit a crime. They led Sierra out. Her father stood frozen. Ty stared like he'd turned to ice. Noah stood in the center of the room like a man split down the middle. I walked to Evan's chair. I pulled it to the table and set it where it belonged. I didn't speak for a long moment. I sat for 1 second, just one, so I could feel the armrest under my hand. Then I stood. I looked at Noah. I'm removing my money from the joint account, I said. I'm opening my own. I'm putting my future into a trust. If you want me in your life, you have to learn how to protect me, not use me. Noah nodded through tears. I turned and walked out. The wind hit my face hard, but for the first time, it didn't feel like I was being thrown out. It felt like I was leaving on my own feet. That Christmas Eve, I went home alone and lit a candle. I didn't have a party. I didn't have laughter, but I had something I thought I'd lost. My name. After Christmas, the legal wheels turned the way they always do. Slow, grinding, unromantic. The bank restored access. Funds were returned. Because there had been internal misconduct, the bank also covered fees, corrected records, and issued a formal apology letter. Mandy was fired and investigated. Sierra faced legal consequences that were no longer family business. Noah wasn't the man who dragged the chair away from me anymore. Not fully. But he wasn't the boy I raised either. He came to my house in early January with a small bag and eyes that looked older than 33. Mom, he said, I filed for separation. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel karma. I just saw a man finally staring at the cliff he'd been sprinting toward. You can stay here a few days, I told him. But you need therapy. You need to learn how to stand without stepping on anyone's throat. Noah nodded. That night, I sat in Evan's chair and listened to the distant surf. I stared at my small tree in the corner and thought about something simple. Family isn't a place you get kicked away from the table. Family isn't a place your name gets erased on paper. Family, if it still means anything, is where someone says, Mom, sit here. And if they can't say that, then I have to say it to myself. I ran my hand along the armrest and whispered into the quiet. Evan, I'm still here. I'm still me. Outside, the lighthouse blinked steadily, nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. Just faithful. And I understood. Sometimes survival isn't about beating someone. Sometimes survival is about refusing to let anyone erase you, no matter who they are or no matter what they call you. And Christmas 2025 taught me that. In the cold, salt air of this little coastal town, I finally learned how to keep my name. Is this conversation helpful so far?